Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I have Dan Hardy with me. Dan, firstly, UFC is coming back to Singapore after a couple of years. So, what can the fans expect from the upcoming fight night?
Well, I think everybody's excited to be here. All of the fighters that I've spoken to so far, they love coming to this area of the world. The fans receive them so well, and I think we've got a great card as well. Especially Holly Holm, Betchko Hay in the main event. Right. Good girl, bad girl. Both like to fight, both tenacious strikers. I think it's a great main event, and then obviously the co-main event, the heavyweights, former heavyweight champion taking on the upcoming prospect. I think it's a great card particularly for the fans in this area of the world. I think they're really going to love it.
Right. And the card itself is so stacked right from the prelims. You have Takanori Gomi in the headline of the prelims, and in the main card obviously you have 4 or 5 top fights. So is it a conscious effort on UFC's part, because they're coming now to Asia after 2 years, to just put on one of the best fight nights in recent memory?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the UFC always look to put the best cards on that they can, but I think particularly with it being a couple of years since we've been to Singapore, I think they want to remind people the kind of talent that we have in the UFC. As you said, Gomi against John Tuck, it really shows you where the talent in the UFC is, from veterans to upcoming prospects. We've kind of got it all, and this card is made up of that. So I think it's a good reminder for people in Asia that the UFC is the best fighters in the world, and I think that this card proves it.
Right, and I don't want to dwell too much into the biggest news that broke earlier today, but just talking about it, that the Conor McGregor Mayweather fight has been made official now. So just how big of an influence could that fight be when it just comes down to the mainstream appeal, just for the sport of mixed martial arts?
Well, what I think it does specifically for the sport of mixed martial arts is it sets it on an even playing field with boxing. There have been a lot of people around the world that they're familiar with boxing because it's been a mainstay of our society for many years, whereas mixed martial arts is quite a new sport. So a lot of people don't see them as the same. They're not on the same level of professional sports, when in actuality they are. If anything, mixed martial arts is edged the market a little bit, because we have, the best fighters in the world fighting each other, and we've not seen that in boxing for a long time. So, I feel like this is kind of evens the playing field out. People will see the best boxer in the world against the pound for pound best mixed martial artist in the world, and they're going to fight. And the other credit to McGregor is that he's coming over into Mayweather's world to take him on at boxing with the big gloves in the boxing ring. So, that's like saying, hey, we can do everything, and we'll challenge you wherever you go.
From what you said, I remember this conversation between Joe Rogan and a boxing pundit about 15 years ago, where Joe Rogan said, mixed martial arts is going to take over boxing soon. Do you think it's finally that time when MMA kind of puts a full stop, to that discussion regarding MMA versus boxing?
I don't think this fight's necessarily going to settle that argument, because it's not. There's no comparison. It's like comparing American football with rugby. They stand alone as individual sports, but boxing's always been used as a way of attacking mixed martial arts, and I think that's why people have always kind of taken offence and have always fought in defence of mixed martial arts, because we love this sport as much as boxers love boxing, and we want the same respect that boxers get, because we deserve it, and I think that it's been a long time coming, but finally, Mayweather and McGregor agreeing to fight each other means that the best boxer in the world recognises McGregor, possibly not as a challenge in a fight, but certainly as the superstar that he is in the sport of mixed martial arts, which shows how big the UFC is. Right. And McGregor is the tip of that spear. He's the person that's pushing forward, and is able to make these kind of waves and get these kind of matchups. I mean, there's not a single other person in the sport of mixed martial arts that could get Mayweather to fight him. But McGregor can do it, and he's done it, and fair play to him.
Right, absolutely. And now, just talking about your work behind the desk, you have transitioned amazingly from fighting inside the cage to actually voicing, what is going on. So how has this transition been for you, from fighting inside the cage to actually calling the fights? How has this journey been for you?
It's been very strange, to be honest. I was not at all expecting it. There was never a thought in my mind when I was competing that I was going to move on to be a commentator and analyst. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Probably go back to university and do something entirely different. But it's been really easy. I love the sport, and I think that comes across in the commentary. And I get paid to watch fights all day. I couldn't think of anything better. So I love it. I am completely immersed in the sport of mixed martial arts, and because every single person that gets into the octagon has my respect, I feel like I have to do them justice in the commentary. So I give them my best. I give every fighter my best, and I hope I do them justice.
Right. And the one thing that shines through with your work and with someone like Brian Stan's work is how much work you actually put in before a fight, the prep work. So just how difficult or how new was it for you when you just started, and when you had to, before for a fight, you have to go through a training camp, and that's a complete different procedure. But before a fight, calling a fight, you do your prep work. Mm-hmm. So how difficult or how new was it for you when you just started doing that?
It was very different. There was some things that crossed over. Obviously, when I was fighting somebody, when I was matched up against somebody, I would watch their fights and research them, make notes, and kind of break them down like I do with other fighters now. But it was always, I'm looking at my opponent, and I have to take myself into consideration. Whereas now, I have to look at two individuals and step back, take myself out of the picture, and just look at these two individuals. So it's actually quite easy. The only difference is the volume of research I have to do now. I would normally have to research 3 or 4 fighters a year. Now I have to do 30 fighters a month. It's a lot more work, but I have no complaints at all. I'm very blessed to have this job.
Right. And the best analysts that we've seen, whether you talk about Dominic Cruz, whether we talk about Daniel Cormier, yourself, Brian Stan, all have a fighting background. So do you think that experience, that kind of psychological edge that you have once you're competed inside the cage, kind of helps you transition when you become an analyst?
I do think it helps. I think there are 2 ways it helps. One is that it kind of validates us as analysts. If people have seen us in the octagon competing, then they trust our words a little more because they feel like we have that inside knowledge. And I think we do. There's a difference between watching a fight and feeling a fight. And when I'm watching 2 fighters against each other, I'm able to step into their shoes. I'm able to feel what they're feeling and think about the thought processes that are going through, and the tension, the anxiety, the stress, the pressure of the event. All those things have to be taken into account, and they affect the technical aspects of the fight. So if you've never been in that situation and you've never felt that tension for yourself, it's very difficult to understand how that would affect you. Right. So sometimes I can see someone and I'm thinking that they're not fighting at their best. There's something else going on there, and I have to look at all the other aspects that could be affecting them. A new training camp, a bad weight cut, whatever it is, But because I have these experiences of having all these issues in my own career, I can relate.
Right, now talking about the weight cuts itself, we see RDA, for example, moving up to 170, and in the past he has talked about how difficult it has been for him to come down to 155. So, and a lot of people have talked about, probably making more divisions between, say, for example, 155 and 170, having a division at 165. Do you think going forward in MMA, because MMA is evolving, every day, with the unified rules coming in, for example, so do you think going forward that is something that we can see, probably, more divisions being integrated into the UFC itself?
Yes, I think so. I think that it's only a matter of time before we have more divisions. Especially with the amount of shows that we're doing now, the amount of shows that are going on around the world, and the amount more fighters that we have in mixed martial arts now. Now, there was a point in, back in the day when the UFC started, when if they had 12 weight classes, they wouldn't have had enough fighters to fill all those weight classes. This is why they didn't bring in the female weight classes or the lighter weight classes for a long time, purely because there wasn't a depth of talent there. But now there is, and now if you look at lightweight and welterweight, they're the 2 busiest weight categories in the UFC. Both of them, we could lose 30% of each of their fighters and move them into different divisions, and it wouldn't affect those weight classes. So I think the time has come, and now obviously with us having so many shows, we need more main events. A few more champions would not go amiss. I would like a light welterweight weight class. I think 162 makes perfect sense because it's right in the middle. I think a 195 makes perfect sense as well. I would like them to divide heavyweight up, so we have a 235 limit or something like that. And I think really then we'll get to see people reach their true potential. Because if you got, so say like RDA, for example, was an excellent lightweight, and he's an excellent welterweight. Right. But at lightweight, he was possibly slightly too big. Right. At welterweight, he might be slightly too small. But in the middle, that might be where we see him at his best.
Right. And we see a lot of MMA journalists, especially from the United States, giving a lot of flack for the divisions. For example, the middleweight division itself. Yeah. So what's your take on that happening, where the champions now kind of know that they have a bargaining chip. It's like they know that since they have the belt, they have a say in who they can fight next. So do you think even the fighters are getting smarter as the game evolves?
Yes, I think they are. I think it was only going to be a matter of time before some of the power shifted to the fighters, and I think that, there are obviously a couple of different fighters that have really established that control on the fighters' part, McGregor being one of them. But at the same time, I think that fighters have a responsibility. I think the champions have a responsibility to be champions. It's a privilege to be a champion as well as an achievement. And when you are a champion, you have a responsibility to the sport and to the fans. And I have no problem with champions saying, I want to fight this guy, I want to fight that guy. Right. But if there's a list of contenders and you're not picking any of the contenders, then that's where the issue lies. So it's a battle back and forth, and the middle ground has not yet been found. Before it was you fight whoever's put in front of you and you don't get a say. Now people are being far too picky. I think we'll now work back towards the middle ground, and I think we'll get the fights that we're supposed to get now in the divisions.
Right, now talking about fight itself, you've previously teased returning inside the cage rather than calling the fights outside. So is there a timeline that you're looking at where you want to get inside the cage, probably for one last time, probably for a couple of more fights? Is there a timeline that you're looking at to probably get inside the cage once again and fight?
I don't have a set timeline, no. Because my intention is to only probably have one more fight. I can take my time and I can pick my opportunity and my opponent, and more importantly, the venue. There are certain places I would like to fight. So I have a little time. I have a full-time job now, more than a full-time job. I wish I had more time, but I don't. It's all-consuming, this job. So to fit a training camp in, I would have to plan around it. And I also have to do the USADA testing pool first, so that will take a little while. So there are a couple of hurdles still to get over. But when the time's right, and I'll know it. I kind of feel like in my heart, when the opportunity presents itself, I will recognise it as the right opportunity, and that's when I'll tweet and I'll say, hey, put my name in, I'll take that one.
Right now, talking about tweets itself, there's been one particular fighter that's been calling you out. As I said, and he's not someone that's been in the sport for very long. He's been here for maybe 1.5 years. Would that be a fight that would interest you? To be, very frank.
No, not at all. No, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight anybody that's looking at being a champion in the future, or looking at getting into the top 10 rankings, or anything like that. Because the truth is, I'm an analyst now. So anybody I fight, if I fight someone that I'm potentially going to be, analysing in the future, commentating on, it's a conflict of interests. There are a lot of guys they have my respect. They're veterans of the game. They've had 30 fights. They're well known to the UFC fans, and they're the kind of guys that I would like to fight. I'm not interested in any up and coming kids, because more than anything, I'm fighting for me. This last one's for me. Right. So I will be stubborn and I'll wait until the right opportunity and the right opponent presents itself, and he's just not the right guy. I will look forward to watching him develop as a fighter, because I think he has a lot of potential. Right. But I'm not a part of it.
Right now, as you say, it's one more fight for you. It's going to be a big special occasion for you. Is there a particular fighter that you're looking at?
No, not really. Particularly not at the moment, because I don't have a timeline in mind, and a lot can change in this sport very quickly. So when the time comes for me to start looking at fights, I'll see what my options are. There are certain people that I've always kept my eye on. There are certain people that the fans would like to see me fight. But ultimately, for me, it's about timing and about venue as well. I would like to fight in New York. I would love to fight in the Saitama Super Arena in Japan. Right. So, if I could fight in one of those two or both, that'd be great.
Right. And, now coming down to India itself, India has this massive MMA following, but no promotion is really looking into tapping that, potential. So, if anyone's going to do that, it has to be the UFC. So, is there any chance of the Indian fans probably seeing some UFC fighters coming down to India? Anything like that happening in the near future?
I hope so. I was having an interesting conversation with someone the other day, actually, who's an Indian gentleman who was interested in putting on a kind of scouting mission where we travel around India and we look at all the up and coming talent, and we start recruiting through the show, kind of like what Dana White does with his shows. And I think it'd be a great idea. I think that Asia as an area of the world has a lot more to offer mixed martial arts than what we're currently seeing, and I think that is it's purely down to the growth of the sport. You know, the sport began in the West. You know, it began in Brazil, moved to America, and it's grown from there. You know, I mean, even in the UK, we're still behind. You know, we're still way behind in Europe. So there's a lot of ground to make up, and I think that a part of the development of the sport will be, you know, these other regions of the world starting to then contribute their fighters. Like we've got, you know, 4 fighters at the moment that are representing Africa. You know, and that's a very new movement. And you've got to think how big a continent Africa is and how much talent there is there. So there's a lot more to add to this sport right now, and I think Asia will have a massive contribution to that.
Right. It's interesting because you said that there's an Indian fighter, Arjun Singh Bhullar, that's been signed to the UFC. He's a Canadian but of Indian descent. So could that could that be a game changer for Indian MMA?
I certainly think so. I mean, he would definitely serve as a bridge for the sport into this region. You know, if he's a talented fighter, he can get a couple of wins in the UFC. There's no reason why we couldn't come over to India and put on a fight night and have him headlining. And then if that happens, you know, we have a talent, we bring that talent into the region, and then we look around the region for other talent to bring onto that show, and that's where we start to look into that, you know, what that country has to offer the sport and the card that we're looking at putting on. And I mean, I know firsthand that there are a lot of talented fighters here. It's just a case of finding that one key figure that will anchor a show in this region, and then it will take off.
Right. So finally, what can the fans expect from the upcoming fight night?
Well, I think there are going to be a lot of stand-up fights. I think there are going to be a lot of spectacular finishes. I'm expecting the Holly Holm-Bechko hair fight to be wild. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a decision. That's going to be a really hard-fought fight for both ladies. Co-main event is going to be explosive. Marcin Tybura is one of the most exciting prospects that we have at heavyweight in Europe. And he has an excellent opportunity in front of him with Andrei Arlovsky, former heavyweight champion. And then, you know, you look down the card, Covington against Dong Kim's a really interesting fight between 2 very different grapplers. Gomi, John Tuck, it's going to be a fun one. Alex Caceres on the card. You know, it's a real treat of a card. I've been enjoying the research, and I'm really excited to see Octagon side for it.
Thank you, Dan. We look forward to the fight night.
Thank you.
Thank you.